I first heard this poem being read at my church around Easter time when I was very small, and I remember sitting on my father's knee and being entranced by this lovely old lady called Grace reading out this wonderful poem. As you will hear, there's an element of faith and ideas of self-sacrifice and unconditional love. This poem influenced my spiritual development at that early age, and even now, when I can access all the wonderful books there are and the richness of the Bible, I return to Mrs. Malone, where I was inspired by her love, her self-sacrifice, generosity and gentleness. Mrs. Malone by Eleanor Fargion. Mrs. Malone lived hard by a wood, all on her lonesome as nobody should, with her crust on a plate and her pot on the coal, and none but herself to converse with, poor soul. In a shawl and a hood she got sticks out a door, on a bit of old sacking she slept on the floor, and nobody asked how she fared, or knew how she managed, for nobody cared. Why make a pother about an old crone? For what should they bother with Mrs. Malone? One Monday in winter, with snow on the ground so thick that a footstep fell without a sound, she heard a faint frostbitten peck on the pane and went to the window to listen again. There sat a cock sparrow, beraggled and weak, with half-open eyelid and ice on his beak. She threw up the sash and she took the bird in, and mumbled and fumbled it under her chin. You're o'er of a smother, you're fair overblown, I've room for another, said Mrs. Malone. Come Tuesday, while eating her dry morning slice, with the sparrow a-picking, ain't company nice. She heard on her doorstep a curious scratch, and there was a cat with its claw on the latch. It was hungry and thirsty and thin as a lathe. It mewed and it meowed on the slithery pave. She threw the door open and warmed up some pap, and huddled and cuddled it in her old lap. There, there, little brother, ye poor skin and bone, there's room for another, said Mrs. Malone. Come Wednesday, while all of them crouched on the mat, with a crumb for the sparrow, a sip for the cat, there was a wailing and a whining outside in the wood, and there sat a vixen with 6 of her brood. She was haggard and ragged and worn to a shred, and her half-dozen babies were only half fed. But Mrs. Malone, crying, "Why, ain't they sweet?" happed them and lapped them and gave them to eat. You warm yourself, mother, you're cold as a stone. There's room for another, said Mrs. Malone. Come Thursday, a donkey stepped in off the road, with sores on its withers from bearing a load. Come Friday, when icicles pierced the white air, down from the mountainside lumbered a bear. For each she had something, if little, to give. Lord knows the poor critters must all of 'em live. She gave them her sacking, her hood and her shawl, her loaf and her teapot. She gave them her all. What with one thing t'other, me family's grown, and there's room for another, said Mrs. Malone. Come Saturday evening, when time was to sup, Mrs. Malone had forgot to sit up. The cat said meow and the sparrow said peep. The vixen, she's sleeping, the bear let her sleep. On the back of the donkey they bore her away, through trees and up mountains beyond night and day, till come Sunday morning they brought her in state, through the last cloud bank as far as the gate. Who is it, said Peter, you have with you there? And donkey and sparrow, cat, vixen and bear exclaimed, do you tell us up here she's unknown? It's our mother, God bless us, it's Mrs. Malone, whom's havings were small and whom's holding was small, and whose heart was so big it had room for us all. Then Mrs. Malone of a sudden awoke. She rubbed her 2 eyeballs and anxiously spoke. "Where am I, to goodness? And what do I see? My dears, let's turn back. This ain't no place for me." But Peter said, "Mother, go in to the throne. There's room for another one, Mrs. Malone."